And hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. It took a while, but Judgment Day has finally come for the New York Giants, with the New York Giants moving on from Joe Judge after Joe Judge going 10-23 over 2 seasons with the New York Giants. And there's so much to get into with this. And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate in a bit and actually defend Joe Judge, which I know a lot of Giant fans might not agree with. But I do think you have to look at the entire picture. And really, in some ways, a lot of Giant fans are celebrating today. And I get why, because personally, I don't think Joe Judge was a good fit for this franchise long term. I don't think he was going to last. And going into next season would have been chaos. But the reason I would be concerned as a Giant fan is because this is a crucial offseason for this organization, and you need to be decisive and you need to have a plan. And basically, this ownership group was not decisive and not convicted in their decisions the last couple days. And what do I mean by that? John Mara and Steve Chish had the opportunity to fire Joe Judge on Sunday night. They did not. They had the opportunity to fire him with the coaching firings on Monday morning. They did not. When did they do it? They did it on Tuesday. So for me, it tells me that they really weren't sure what to do. So did you want him to be the coach of your franchise or not? And again, I actually have a theory about why this firing happened on Tuesday, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you look at the Giants right now, and this is why I would be concerned as a Giant fan. The Giants are treating their brand like a legacy brand. What do I mean by that? Right now, the ownership group is more concerned about conserving the integrity of the organization because the Giants have been this bedrock franchise and they've always had this reputation in the NFL of being one of the great franchises in the National Football League. But again, I think that's a little bit misconstrued because the Giants were great when they had Tom Coughlin and Bill Parcells, two unbelievable coaches, two Hall of Fame coaches. But you look at the Giants the last 10 years, they have not been that vision of stability. They have not been what you would imagine the Giants franchise has been. And again, I think a lot of it is they are acting off legacy. They're going back to the good old days. The problem is with that, the Giants need to move forward. And the Giants, I don't think, realize that unfortunately for them, people don't view them the way they once were viewed. And again, there's a lot that goes into this. But what happened on Monday that I believe changed John Mara's mind? Because John Mara has admitted that he listens to the sports talk, he listens to the fans, like he cares about what the fans think. And what happened in 48 hours from kickoff, even before kickoff on Sunday to the end of Monday night? You can't tell me John Mara was happy when in the last game of the season against arch rival Washington, they pull up to the stadium and it's deserted. It's only a third full of fans. No one showed up to that game. And again, I don't necessarily kill fans when the tickets are expensive. It's January and it's a meaningless football game. But that's not a good optic for your franchises. You're going to your last home game of the season. You're not going to play for months. And the parking lot is a ghost town. And it was all over social media. Then, of course, you have the game, which was a disaster. And then on Monday, all you heard about on Black Monday, yes, you heard about Brian Flores getting surprisingly fired. But what was the main talking point among the local radio and among the national radio? It was the New York Giants. It was how they didn't fire Joe Judge. And on top of that, they didn't make a decision. They just left fans and they left people in the wind. They didn't give a definitive decision. And I have a theory about this. My feeling is because Jay Glazer reported this on Sunday, which is the Giants did not want to become an organization and have that reputation as an organization that just rolls through head coaches and go through now their third head coach in 6 years, basically giving each head coach 2 seasons. And say what you want about the head coaches for the Giants, but when you're a head coach in the NFL, you need at least 3 years. Sometimes you can tell it ain't really working early, but again, if you were gonna be the head coach of the Giants and you look at this situation right now, it's not a good situation for a head coach because again, if they don't make the playoffs basically in 2 years, they're telling you you're fired. And you look at this roster, this cap situation, this quarterback situation, it isn't good. It's terrible. But what I believe what happened is John Mara and Steve Tisch wanted a scapegoat. They wanted to not hurt their reputation. They wanted to have someone else do the dirty work. And they said it Monday. They would let the new GM handle the situation. So, what I believe that they personally wanted to do was wait it out and let the new general manager make the decision on Joe Judge. So, again, I believe that they were leaning toward firing him. But if the general manager fires him, hey, it wasn't ownership. We let the football people make the decisions. We let this new general manager have control. You see, guys, this this isn't us. We're not chaotic, but again, they are chaotic. What happened yesterday? They got blistered. And even on Tuesday, they had another meeting with Joe Judge. And I guarantee you that meeting was basically Joe Judge wanted to know about his future and basically wanted to convince you, like, look, am I going to have a job when we get a new general manager or not? And I believe the Giants at that point said to him, we're not sure. And I'm pretty sure Joe Judge probably asked to be fired because he's like, look, I don't want to just wait this out and get embarrassed more. Just get it over with. But you look at what has happened with Joe Judge, and it is amazing. This is the only time I have ever seen an NFL coach talk himself out of a job. 6 weeks ago, basically, just Joe Judge had a job next year. He had a job. He just didn't have to screw it up. And again, if the Giants were horrendous on the field, and I know they've lost by 10 in the last 6 games, I get that they haven't been competitive. But again, you look at the quarterback situation, and I'll get to Gettleman in a minute. But to me, if they were just horrendous on the field and Joe Judge kept his mouth shut, he would have a job today, in my opinion. But what happened? He went on that 11-minute diatribe about the golf clubs, about the players not quitting, about how players still want to be here. He became a clown. He became a punching bag. He became an easy target. And again, he made a cardinal sin, which was he was calling out another organization. He was calling out the Washington football team organization. And he was calling out Ron Rivera, who's one of the most respected people in the National Football League. And he was calling them out about effort and about being an organization. And this was a guy who also decided to run 2 QB sneaks in the second quarter of a game that meant nothing. He basically quit. Joe Judge quit in that game. And all people were talking about that game was that they ran 2 goofy quarterback sneaks. And again, the first one I didn't have a problem with because it was to give the punter a little bit of room. But again, the Giants are going anywhere. They have 4 wins. They're not going anywhere that season. Try something. And I get people saying, well, they didn't want Fromm to throw a pick 6. At this freaking point, what does it matter? It doesn't matter. And again, I give Ron Rivera a lot of credit because there are a lot of coaches in the NFL. If you had said that about them, not only would they have killed you, they would have embarrassed you. I mean, the Giants embarrassed themselves in that last game against Washington. But I guarantee you, if the Cowboys, if basically Joe Judge said this about Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, you don't think the Cowboys would have dropped 50 points on that Giant team? If it was any other organization pretty much in the NFL, I mean, we look at, like, as a Jet fan, I know that Bill Belichick, if he has a chance to rub it in on the New York Jets, He's going to rub it in and he's going to embarrass the Jets. And he did this year when he put up 50 points when the Jets lost their starting quarterback and basically didn't have enough bodies to finish a game in New England. He didn't care. He basically embarrassed them on TV. Ron Rivera was classy. He didn't embarrass this Giant organization. He easily could have. And again, I have to give him credit because he didn't do that. He took the high road. But Joe Judge, basically, if it wasn't for his mouth, he'd be the head coach of the New York Giants today. But again, this is the thing with the Giants is, are the ownership group concerned about winning? I think right now they're more concerned about their reputation. And again, it's a reputation. It's like that classic family, like they have a business, they're known in the community, and things aren't going right. But you know what? They want to protect their brand. They want to make sure that people still respect what they do. But unfortunately for the Giants, they become a laughing stock. And again, one of the things that I think has exacerbated the problem in a weird way for the Giants and has helped cover their dysfunction has been their building tenant, the New York Jets. Because the Giants could always fall back on well, at least we're not the Jets. We're not the clown show like the Jets. And look, the Jets the last couple of years have been an embarrassment, especially when you look at all the chaos around them, where they had a general manager pick a draft and then they fired the general manager, where they fired a head coach, hired a head coach from their own division with a losing record who absolutely no Jet fan wanted, to having a crazy-eyed press conference where basically every Jet fan was like, get Adam Gase out of here, to the point where last year you actively had a fan base rooting for a team to not win a single game. But things have changed this year. The Jets are still a bad football team. But you look at the Jets right now, they at least have a sense of direction. They have a plan. They seem to have a young quarterback in place. They have draft picks. They have capital. And again, despite them being a bad football team, there weren't crazy stories about the Jets this year. There wasn't crazy stories about the way their players were acting. There wasn't any locker room drama. There wasn't any big stories that came out about the Jets. They seem like they've turned it around and at least look like they are a competently run organization. They are still a bad football team, but at least they seem to have everything in place and at least seem to be competent and not running it like a clown show. The problem is that deodorant's no longer there for the Giants because the Giants now are the laughing stock because of what Joe Judge has said, because they basically have, I mean, like I said, Joe Judge talked his way out of a job. I truly believe he would have been the head coach of the Giants this year. Now, again, I'm going to go off a little bit here on a different path. I'm going to get back to Joe Judge and actually play devil's advocate about how this was in ways unfair to him, and also talk about how the Giants, this was the lesser of evils and they had to make this decision. And again, I said that they were about to become the Jets 2.0 if they kept Joe Judge. I will get to that in a minute, but I do think we have to address an elephant in the room for this New York Giant organization that, to me, again, the Giants once again tried to do the classy thing and it ended up blowing up in their face, which was allowing Dave Gettleman to retire. Dave Gettleman should have been fired. I don't care how old he is. I understand everything he's gone through in his life, all the adversity he has faced in his life. And personally, I don't have any ill will toward Dave Gettleman. But you needed to send a message that what he did to this organization and how he built this franchise was unacceptable. And again, is it the end of the world that he doesn't have fire next to his name? No, but again, it would show that this organization does not accept failure. And again, Dave Gettleman was the GM for way too long for this organization. And the Giants are where they are now because of their drafting. Because Dave Gettleman was incredibly stubborn and basically didn't look at how the NFL was evolving and didn't understand the situation. I said this back years ago when I did my draft grade after the 2018 draft where they drafted Saquon Barkley. And I made a bold claim that night. And a lot of people got on me for this on my video of when I did this grade. But I believed it was true at the time, and I still think it would have been a that the Giants should have done this, but once again I got flack for it. And I basically said if I was the owners of the New York Giants and Dave Gettleman came to that podium and basically said, I did not listen to any trade offers for the number 2 pick in the draft, I would have fired him that night. I would have let him go because that is negligence. That is hurting the franchise. Because again, we are looking at a situation where Sam Darnold, and say what you want about what Sam Darnold's become, but at the time, he was the number 1 prospect coming out of college. And by some miracle, the Cleveland Browns took Baker Mayfield. You had the New York Jets sitting there at number 3, who you knew was taking a quarterback. And you had a bunch of teams that were willing to trade up. And Dave Gettleman had the audacity to basically not only refuse to take phone calls where he might have gotten 3 or 4 first round picks for that selection and gotten so much draft capital, it would have been easier to rebuild this franchise. But instead, he said, I'm going to take a running back at number 2. And basically, at that point, was saying, I believe he could be a Hall of Famer. At the same time, not having an offensive line in front of him. Then, when he selects his quarterback in Daniel Jones, I mean, we can go back through all the bad draft blunders, but you have to look at the final product of the New York Giants. And I also said this last year, too, when the Giants made the trade down to Chicago. I said, you better have a good football team next year because Dave Gettleman, I think in his heart of hearts, thought he had another season. Because to me, I said, this trade's weird because if you feel you're on the hot seat, why are you giving away a first round pick this year? Why are you? I know you're getting more draft assets, but if you're not here next year, what does it matter? And I still at the time believed that the Giants weren't aggressive. They didn't go up and get the receiver that they want, either Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. They didn't go up and get Micah Parsons. They just sat there and traded back. And then they drafted Kadarius Toney, who has been an issue and has been injury prone. And again, Dave Gettleman to me should have been fired because of the way he left this organization. He left this organization in shambles. Not only did he leave this organization again, did he leave the general manager 2 top 10 picks? Sure, that's great, but they are in the worst cap situation, arguably in the NFL. They have big investments on this organization to players who are good players, but not great players. They have terrible cap number. And again, you look at the players they invested, the amount of money they invested in Kenny Galladay, all these contracts, it's all dead money. You can't cut these guys. Even if you cut them, you're not saving anything. So the Giants have a bad roster. And again, Dave Gettleman talked a big game. He said, it's my job to fix this offensive line. The Giants have the worst offensive line in football. They do. And look, I have watched this Giant team. I have reached out to people that work in this industry. I have reached out to people that cover the NFL. I've reached out to people that basically watch these guys and give evaluations. And you know what? The consensus was they have a good player in Andrew Thomas. He'll be a solid left tackle for 10 years. But the other 4 positions on their offensive line are at best backups. I mean, their second best offensive lineman last year, Zeitler, they let go in free agency. I mean, Will Hernandez is a backup. Nate Solder has been a disaster. He's a backup. I like Matthew Pert. He's a backup. They have 4 backups on the offensive line in a division where you have 3 of the best front sevens in the NFL, and 2 of which are very young and going to keep getting better in Dallas and Washington. You have a situation where Dave Gettleman not only failed to build the offensive line, but failed miserably to build the offensive line. You look at Dave Gettleman, the biggest acquisition he has arguably made for this team has been Leonard Williams, where he traded a 3 and a 5 to the Jets. The Jets have used one of those picks to get a good running back in Michael Carter. They've also signed Leonard Williams to a massive contract after he had one great career year. And I know a lot of people in the Jets building, and I remember year 2 of Leonard Williams. I was at training camp and I was watching Leonard. I'm like, wow, Leonard looks pretty good this year. And I will never forget what they told me. They said, he does not have that gear. He likes football, but he's never going to be as good as he can be. They said in a contract year when he needs his money, he's going to be unbelievable. But when he has his money or when he's not playing for a contract, he's never going to be as good as he can be. And look at what's happened. He's had good years, don't get me wrong, but you look at the best year of his career and the two best, it's when he was paying for a contract. This last year, he was still good, but he wasn't the player he was before. And again, the Barkley pick is something that is egregious. And I see people in the chat saying it wasn't a bad pick. Again, I'm not disputing the player. I don't like, to me, it's not picking Barkley. It's the fact that as a general manager, it is your job to do what is best for your organization. It is your job to do what is the best thing for your organization. And the fact that you as a general manager were refusing to take a phone call, you were refusing to even listen to possible trade offers where you could have gotten one of the biggest packages in NFL draft history to help rebuild a roster at the time with Eli Manning, who you were hoping to get another run with. You can't tell me you couldn't have used those picks to help the offensive line, to help the defense. There's so much more you could have added to that team, but instead, you just didn't even answer the phone. That is negligence. That is negligence. And again, they did that. Dave Gettleman basically destroyed this team. And you want to put the blame on Joe Judge? I get it. But let's be honest. The reason the Giants are where they are is Dave Gettleman. Because the Giants are a bad team that's overpaid, that has no cap flexibility. And again, if I was to say, who is a young building block on this team that you feel confident is going to still be a good player for the Giants in 3 years? I could go Andrew Thomas at left tackle. Maybe Leonard Williams will be a solid defensive lineman. A little bit overpaid for what he is, but again, he's still a solid player. Other than them, I can't think of a really good young building block. Saquon looks like he's shot. Saquon doesn't look like the same running back, and he's been beaten up. You don't know about Dan Jones. Again, Kadarius Toney, I'm concerned about his injuries, and I'm concerned about his off-the-field issues. I mean, just look at what they've gone through this season. Again, Kadarius Toney is a talented player, but he's had the issues off the field. I mean, Kadarius, like 2 games after not getting any catches, was basically blasting the team on social media. And again, in retrospect, was he probably right? Sure. But I mean, you look at the other receivers in the draft, they've had a lot better years and more success. I mean, you look at the Jets at the 34th pick. Elijah Moore looks like a lot better player than Kadarius Toney does with the 20th pick. It's not even Toney. It's like with Saquon with the Giants. The Giants had an opportunity to get Micah Parsons. They had the opportunity to easily go up and get a player and go up and get a receiver to help Daniel Jones, but instead they waited. And when they waited, they lost out. And then they traded back and got first-round picks this year. Nate John, James Bradbury is a good corner. Again, good player, but he's like Leonard Williams. I think they're both very good players, but I don't think their contract reflects their players. Like, they are getting paid like top 3 or 4 for their position. Is James Bradbury a top 4 corner in the NFL? No, he's a very good corner. He's not a top 4 corner. Leonard Williams is getting paid like a top 3 interior defensive lineman. Is he a top 3 defensive lineman in the NFL? No. I mean, no. So, but again, I think Gettleman should have been fired. He should have had that on his resume, and he should have been, assigned this failure as well. But I'm going to go back a little bit here and talk a little bit about Joe Judge, because again, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate. Just give me a quick sec here. Just got to charge the computer real quick. There we go. Thought I had enough juice, but didn't. But I'm actually going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, probably. And again, Daquan Jones, Leo, probably top 10 defensive line. Again, he is. I think both of those players are top 10 of their positions. But the key in the NFL is you have to pay players what they're worth. You play A players like A players, but the problem is, in what happens to organizations, what put organizations behind the 8 ball and makes it hard to win, is when you're playing B plus players, A plus money. That's the biggest problem. I mean, you saw it a bit with Dallas when they started giving those linebackers and DeMarcus Lawrence initially those big contracts. They were stuck. They were inflexible, and they really had to hit home runs in the draft. And luckily, they did with Diggs and Parsons. And again, bad teams do have to overpay, but you also have to budget it out. Again, the Giants have 0 cap room. I mean, when you look at this roster and you look at the talent on this roster, should the Giants have no cap room? I mean, they were basically redoing contracts during the season to just get enough players on the field. I mean, Kenny Galladay, they're paying him like an elite receiver. Is he a top 10 receiver in the NFL? I mean, you look at the contracts, they're bad. And again, this is part of the problem is Dave Gettleman, like, it didn't match this. He went all in on free agency. If you're going to go all in on free agency, go all in the draft. And instead, he went for the rebuild. It looked like the draft plan was different than the free agency plan. I mean, they have to have one vision, one plan. And again, I just, Dave Gettleman, like, I know Joe Judge is the sacrificial lamb right now, but again, I think the Giants, again, they were trying to do the classy thing, and I understand that they're trying to be above and beyond and be one of these great organizations and how they handle situations. But again, I think they handled this horribly because Dave Gettleman should be getting more of the blame and Dave Gettleman should be getting more of the critique. But by letting him slip out the door and retire and keeping Joe Judge twisting in the wind, not knowing his future, basically allowed Giant fans and the national media to basically blister this organization, and they had every right to. And I want to defend Joe Judge for a little bit. Again, do I think Joe Judge is a great coach? No. But again, this organization did him no favors. And again, Joe Judge, like I said before, talked his way out of this job. I don't think that there's any question about that. And I do think if he kept his mouth shut, he probably would still be the head coach. But you look at what happened with him. When the reports came out mid-season this year that John Mara basically was considering Joe Judge his next Bill Parcells or Bill Belichick, that was incredibly unfair. And again, Mara might have said that in confidence to someone. He may have said that to someone he didn't think was going to let that leak out. But when that leaked out, I think that's what started the clock on Joe Judge. Because Giant fans, I think, were not sold necessarily on Joe Judge. But when they heard that the ownership believed that he was going to be arguably the next great Giant coach, where you look at Belichick or Parcells, people were rolling their eyes and going, what's this organization thinking right now? How could they think that this guy is going to be the next head coach? And again, like, I just feel like this organization put so much pressure on Judge and such unrealistic expectations where, again, it was the perfect storm where the Giant fan thought this was a playoff team this year. And I warned them before the year that last year was a bit of a mirage because, again, the Giants were in playoff contention because this division was god awful. I mean, they had 6 wins and were hoping to go to the postseason. You see that once maybe every 10 years, a team in a division that's so bad that a division winner gets in with a losing record. That's not the normal. That's not the average. That's not the mean. That's the outlier. And again, the Giants and I believe their fan base thought that this team was a lot closer, that they were a 9-8 playoff team, that this was a good team. But again, they came in with questions about the quarterback, about the wide receivers. This team had a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. And again, first 3 games played close, but ended up losing all 3. And again, one thing I said about Black Monday is you look at all those coaches, what's the one common thread they all have? They didn't have a good quarterback or they didn't have an answer at quarterback. And really, that's what I think happened to the Giants. Because don't forget, Daniel Jones was not drafted by Joe Judge. He was drafted by Dave Gettleman in the previous coaching staff. So basically, Joe Judge never truly got to have input on who his quarterback was. And again, did he take the job because of Daniel Jones? Probably. But still, you look for Joe Judge. He came in, he had to change the culture. And after the first year, it seemed like the Giants were going in a bit of the right direction. But what's happened? This team which had playoff expectations, which I think were misconstrued coming into this year, basically start off horribly, and I just think everything snowpiled and got out of control. And again, Giant fans are incredibly passionate. They are incredibly passionate and very smart. And when they see this team underperforming and not playing up to snuff, they're going to call them out, they're going to get angry, and that's basically what happened. But again, I put more of the Giants' failure on Dave Gettleman, not Joe Judge. And I said this, I do believe that Joe Judge, if he had kept his mouth shut, would have been the head coach. But again, I said that they were about to become the Jets 2.0, and the Giants had to make a decision that was in the best interest. Both decisions were bad and have bad optics, but to me, this is the decision that they had to make because of the situation they were in. Because, again, you want to get the best general manager to help fix this mess. No general manager or no good one was going to come in and keep Joe Judge. General managers now want to have control. That's the appeal. They want to have the opportunity to pick the head coach. And you look right now, the Giants of all the head coaching candidacies, and there's a lot out there right now. There's 7. You could still make the case, even with 2 top 10 first-round picks. They have the 5th and 7th pick in the draft. The Giants are probably the worst situation right now, especially given their cap situation. And one of the things is the quarterback. The new general manager is going to have to make a decision. And I do think that now the Giants will be in play for a quarterback because if Joe Judge was coming back, I do believe the Giants in their perfect world want to keep Daniel Jones for 1 more year, keep Joe Judge for 1 year, find a good general manager, and have him find the right pieces so they didn't have to make a big decision. Now I just feel like it's the best option because you have a clean slate. You can get arguably the best general manager candidate you can get. And the one benefit that the Giants have this offseason is not the quarterback, but for head coaches, there's a lot more talent this year, and there's a lot more good head coaches that you can get. I mean, Brian Flores is on the market. Mike Zimmer. I mean, those are 2 head coaches that even though they were fired, I would take them as the Giants. Doug Peterson. I mean, there's a lot of good head coaches out there for this team. So I do think that there's a good market. But the big problem for the Giants is I do think that it's become slightly easier now to get a general manager and a head coach. But comparing the Giants and the Jets again, the Giants have to have the perfect offseason. because they have absolutely zero wiggle room because of their cap situation. Even if they can move it around and fix it a little bit, the most they're going to have is maybe $10 million, and that's being generous. That's maybe 2 or 3 role players. The Jets at least have a little bit of a buffer because the Jets have the option because they have so many draft picks and they also have 65, probably close to $70 million. If the Jets miss on a draft pick or player, but hit in free agency on the players, or they miss on a player or two in free agency, but hit in the draft, they have a little bit more wiggle room. The Giants cannot miss on anyone in free agency. They don't have the luxury to, and the Giants cannot miss in this draft. They need to hit a home run with players. Now, again, what do the Giants do? Do they take the best available at 5 and 7? Do they try to get the best quarterback? And again, if the Giants are in the market for a quarterback, I don't think they can wait at 5 and hope that quarterback falls. And again, I keep seeing all these rumors that Russell Wilson wants to come to the Giants. And again, I saw this morning too, is one of the reasons people believe that Mara made the decision was because Mara was hoping to maybe bring Aaron Rodgers. And when Aaron Rodgers called them a clown show on Pat McAfee by running the 2 QB sneaks, that's what led Mara to firing Joe Judge. Again, I don't think that was the only reason. I don't think it helped. I think it helped make the decision easier for John Mara, but I just believe that the Giants, again, I know everyone feels that they're going to trade for a superstar quarterback. And even if Russell Wilson was available, I don't think Russell Wilson wants to come here. I know he's on the list, but again, if Russell Wilson had the option to go to, even if he just sticks with the list he had, go to Denver, who has a good defense and will likely get a new head coach, or go to New Orleans, who has a great offense, he's going to go to one of those 2 teams before he goes to the Giants. And again, the Giants, let me play devil's advocate again. The Giants trade those first round picks for a star quarterback. How's it going to work with their cap space? They don't have enough cap space to get players with the current roster. If they trade for, even if the quarterback reworks the contract, Russell Wilson is going to be like a $30 million cap hit. How are you going to move around the cap? And again, you're trading all that draft capital to get a quarterback. And again, how are you going to improve the roster? Do you get like maybe 2 or 3 more wins with a great quarterback? Sure, but then you're like a 6 and 7 win team. I just Giants opinion sports. Giants can free up more cap space. I was looking at the other day, like I looked at all the dead cap money. I was going through over the cap and basically looking and seeing what the Giants cap situation. And look, it ain't good. It ain't good. Like people keep saying, "Oh, the Giants cap situation isn't that bad." It's not that bad. Giants right now going to next season are negative with cap space, 30 by $367,000. I mean, I'm just looking at the cut. Like James Bradbury, his cap number is 21. The Giants could save $12 million, but then that would cost them $9 million. So they only really get $3 million out of that. I mean, Saquon, do they move on from Saquon? It's a $7.2 million cap hit. But again, who's going to take Saquon? What are you going to get for him? Even Nate Solder, he's a $4 million dead cap hit, even with a 0 base salary. I mean, Leonard Williams, $35 million in dead cap. Andrew Thomas, of course, they're not moving on. Daniel Jones, $8 million in dead cap. Adoree Jackson, $18 million in dead cap. Even if they cut him, it's a $3 million against the cap. So they actually lose money by cutting him. Sterling Shepard. Every player that has a big cap number on the Giants they could cut, they're not saving that much. I feel they're going to renegotiate a couple contracts, but in the grand scheme of things, they maybe Nate Solder frees up money. I'm looking at Nate Solder right now. It says he's a $4 million dead cap money if they cut him before June 1st. Again, like even if they cut Solder, if it saves a couple million, there's the most high end, they're going to get like $15 million, maybe 20. But again, like the problem is like the only free agents that have Leo, Galladay, and Adoree. But again, they're paying Galladay, Leo, and Adoree a ton of money. I mean, the cap hit for next year for Leonard Williams is $19 million. The cap number is $27.3 million, guaranteed $9 million. So he's a $27 million hit against the cap next year. Galladay is a $21 million hit. Those two players alone, that is like, you look right there. Those two players alone are $48 million against the Giants cap next year. And again, the cap's likely going to go up, which will help. But when we're talking about $210 million of cap space, and you're talking about two players taking up a fifth of that, I mean, Galladay, like 21, Adoree Jackson, $15 million, Sterling Shepard, $12 million. Again, like James Bradbury, $21 million cap hit next year. Again, Giants are in cap hell. They are in cap hell. And again, cap is fake. Yeah, it's going to go up and they're going to get some more cap space. But again, it's not like a big cap number. Like, the most you're going to get is one great free agent, or you're going to get two or three decent free agents. But again, the Giants have the 2 first-round picks. Other than that, they don't have much. I'm interested to see what the new GM does. Do they trade back to try to get more draft capital? But again, like I said, this Giant offseason, they have such a razor edge for error. They cannot make a big error. They cannot make a bad free agent signing. They cannot miss on these draft picks. If they do, they are going to be screwed. And again, last offseason, they had the flexibility. They had the money to go get free agents, and look how that turned out. And again, the other thing you worry about too is, how do these guys fit the new coach? Do they fit the new scheme? One of the things, like comparing the Jets, like you look this year, their 2020 draft was horrible. But one of the biggest reasons it was horrible is because those players didn't fit the new scheme that Robert Saleh brought over. If you bring a coach with a very different scheme, like again, the Giants ran the 3-4. What if you go get a coach that wants to run the 4-3? I mean, Leonard Williams can be a good interior defensive tackle, but the Giants don't really have an edge in a 4-3. They don't really have the personnel to run a 4-3 defense right now. What if they want to dramatically change the offensive system? There's no quick fix. I mean, there's no quick fix. And again, you compare Dave Gettleman. I have a perfect example of who to compare him to. Mike McCagnon for the New York Jets. Because both of those guys had horrendous drafts. But again, they also opted for free agency fixes that have screwed the franchise. One of the reasons I've defended Joe Douglas, is that for the Jets, people have said, like, you're giving him way too much time. Like, he had to recover from Mike McCann. They're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I want to remind people, this is Joe Douglas's third off season. His third off season. This is the first time he will have the Trumaine Johnson contract off the books. That contract was so bad. Trumaine Johnson was the highest paid corner on the Jets last year. He didn't play a damn game for the Jets. CJ Mosley is a good linebacker, but the Jets are paying him $18 million next year. $18 million. And if you're the Giants, you have to be worried, because it's taken the Jets 2 to 3 years just to get in a position to basically have an opportunity to rebuild from that ineptitude. The Giants are in a situation very similar. And again, they need to hit a home run. They need to bat 1,000 this offseason, because again, this division right now is a very precarious one for the Giants. Because I don't love Jalen Hurts as a quarterback, but the Eagles are in the playoffs. I don't think the Eagles played up to how good they can be, and they still made the playoffs this year. Dallas looks set, because Dallas has hit another home run in the draft. And you look at their defense now, the biggest problem with Dallas, they didn't have playmakers on the defense. Guess what? They have players on the defense now. They have playmakers on the defense. And even Washington this year didn't have their starting quarterback basically the entire year. Ryan Fitzpatrick was supposed to be their quarterback. And Heineke basically is a high-end backup. If you need him to start 4 or 5 games, fine, but he's not an NFL starter. They also lost their best player, Chase Young, to an ACL injury, and that team still had more win than the Giants. If Washington hits on a quarterback this offseason, if they draft the right quarterback, you look at the Giants all of a sudden, you go, okay, Washington has their quarterback. Hell, the Eagles have maybe 2 with Gardner Minshew, and Dallas has their quarterback. And again, I see Washington ain't doing shit while Snyder's their owner. Again, like that's the scary thing too. Like this is a weak division, Giant fans. Like that's the other thing that has to concern you. Like this division is going to get better. I mean, we're not talking about this being the AFC West. We're not talking about this being the NFC, like the NFC West. This is a division like you win 9 games, you could be in the playoffs. Like you win 10 games, you can be in the playoffs. I mean, that has to also be concerning too, because like you look at bad teams like even the Jets, who, like I said, they had 4 wins this year, but they had Brian Flores, who just got fired, but the Dolphins won 9 games. Bills Bills are in the playoffs and Patriots in the playoffs. They have 3 potential playoff teams in their division. I mean, the Eagles snuck into the playoffs, but you don't really feel like they could do much in the postseason. And you look at Washington, if like Washington gets it right, man, like I would be worried. I mean, we're talking about where teams are. Washington got absolutely smoked by Dallas, embarrassed. And that same team embarrassed the Giants. Like, could you imagine if, like I said, if Joe Judge called out the Cowboys before week 18? I don't think Jerry would have taken too kind of that. I think he would have basically told his coaching staff, I don't care how we do it, but we are going to bury the Giants and embarrass them in week 18. So I do think that they're very lucky. And again, this was the right decision because I kept saying, and I did an episode about this, that the Giants were about to become the Jets 2.0 because I said, you cannot bring in a general manager and keep your head coach. Because the Jets tried that and tried it twice, and it was a disaster both times. You did it with Rex Ryan where they let Tannenbaum go, and they couldn't get a good candidate because no one wanted to work with Rex. They had to get settled for John Idzik, who was a disaster. Then they had Mike McCagnon, who was terrible. But then they brought in Adam Gase to work with Mike McCagnon instead of, I don't know, firing Mike McCagnon. It was so bad the two couldn't even sit together in the freaking draft. And it was so bad that they had to fire McCagnon after the draft because of how bad their relationship was. I was saying, like, if the Giants kept Joe Judge, it was going to limit who they could get as a general manager. I still think it's going to be tough to get a good general manager, and it might be tough to get a head coach because they've gone through so many coaches. But again, I think of all the options, neither were good, but this was the best course. Like, this was the best choice of action for this Giant team. But again, Joe Judge might be a decent coach down the line. He might get another opportunity to prove he can be a good head coach. Because again, when we're looking at an offensive line that's basically starting a decent left tackle and 4 backups, we're looking at a team where their best player is a running back that isn't completely healthy. We're looking at a team with a quarterback who I believe is a decent quarterback, but with no offensive line, with receivers constantly getting hurt, with basically no real sense of direction, just got absolutely shot. Like, I believe Daniel Jones, like, his confidence is just shot. Like, I don't think he can come back as the quarterback next year as well. Like, he can't stay healthy. He hasn't developed. And again, if the general manager and the head coach decide that Daniel Jones is better than any option in this draft, then fine. But again, you all need to be on the same page. This idea that a couple weeks ago was floated out that Joe Judge and Daniel Jones are coming back no matter what. I said that's a grave mistake because a general manager wants control. A general manager wants to have a coach that they picked. Why? Because the coach answers to them, and it's a coach that they believe can mesh with the personnel that they're going to bring in. And again, I do think that that's the best choice for this team going forward, but they have a lot of difficult decisions to make and a lot of decisions that are going to determine how quickly this franchise gets turned around or how long they toil in obscurity. Because again, the first thing you need is a quarterback. That is going to be the biggest decision this offseason, whether to ride it out with Daniel Jones for one more season or to basically reboot it and get a quarterback in this draft. The next question is, how do they address the holes on this roster? Because again, they don't have the luxury of a huge cap space. So they have to hit on every free agent. They have to hit on the majority of their draft picks. They can't have misses. They can't have misses. One of the problems with Gettleman's draft is there might have been a good player in each draft he had, but that was about it. I mean, you look last year you could make the case was probably one of his better second round picks in Carter. But again, you look at the rounds 2 through 6, how many of those players are on the Giants and contributing? And again, a lot of the guys like Will Hernandez is still there, but the Giants don't have any better options. So they have so many needs right now. Do the Giants basically, and again, this ownership group, I feel they have to give out what the 49ers gave out to John Lynch and Shanahan years ago, which was 6-year contracts. Because you need to send a message to these guys, to this fan base, and to the New York media that this is going to be a process. That's one of the reasons the Jets gave Joe Douglas such a long contract. And again, people are saying like this is a make or break year. If the Jets win 4 games next year, I do believe Douglas is gone. But again, if we see more progress, he's under a long-term contract. I don't think the Jets want to be paying 2 or 3 general managers at the same time. I think the same goes for the Giants. They're still paying for the last head coach, and they just fired another head coach. So they have to send a message to this coaching staff and to this organization and to this front office. This is going to take a while because if you're a head coach and you have any feeling that they could get rid of you after 2 years, like if you don't make the playoffs in 2 years, you're not going to want this job because, again, I don't think the Giants are going to be a playoff team within the next 2 years. They could if they hit everything right. But again, this roster is in a position where, again, they don't have financial flexibility. They don't have an answer at quarterback. Like, if they come out and, like, let's say they draft a rookie this year and the rookie looks good, then I could say maybe year 2 because then they have some more flexibility. They have the rookie wage for that quarterback. Like, I could see that. Or if Daniel Jones somehow miraculously stay healthy and looks to improve under this new coaching staff, I'd be like, all right, they got their guy. They don't have a question mark. But again, I'm just looking at the comments right now. This defense is good. Their offense is just not good. No QB. This is the thing with the Giants. Like, they need to basically tell this head coach, like, you got 4 or 5 years. This front office, you get 4 or 5 years. Because, again, you cannot be an organization with constant turnover. Because, again, we saw with the Browns. The Browns finally hit a home run because they finally got the right head coach and they finally got the right general manager. But that was more luck to me than skill. And again, they still don't have an answer at quarterback, and that's why they didn't make the playoffs. And again, if you're the Giants, the biggest question this entire offseason, I know it's going to be focused, predicated on the general manager and the head coach, and that should be it. But again, once they're in place, the big question for that staff is what they do at quarterback. Because if you don't have a plan for the quarterback position, this is just going to continue. It's just going to continue. Do you think Joe Judge will ever get a coaching job again? I think he needs to get another coordinator job. I think he could get a job too, because I do think, again, he has to portray that, he's got the nickname Timmy Tough Nuts from Dan Orlovsky. But if he can prove that he has gotten better and look like if he's in the interview saying like, look, I understand New York, like I made mistakes, like I was saying the wrong things, like I didn't handle myself professionally in the media. I've worked on that. Again, I think he could get an opportunity. I think I'd like to see more of I know he's a special teams guy, but I'd like to see him as a full-time coordinator, maybe a college coach. But again, I think he's still 40. He's got time ahead of him. And the one thing I could say about Joe Judge is he came into a situation that basically wasn't ideal. And again, he led to himself getting fired. I don't think there's any debate about that. But again, you look at the state of the Giants, and I do think he could use not as an excuse, but basically saying, "Look, I didn't have anything to work with," and I think that most people would agree with that. And again, this is a different situation. Like people say, "Well, what about Adam Gase with the Jets?" Again, we saw Adam Gase fail as a head coach, and we heard a lot of bad things about him as a head coach. And one of the problems I had was if you're doing a retread coach, I want him to go back to being coordinator to A, get humbled, but B, you want to have some time to digest it and learn from their mistakes. Adam Gase didn't get that opportunity. Joe Judge is going to get that opportunity because there's no way he's going to be hired again as a head coach this year. But I do think he's got some nice things working for him. But again, the problem with the Belichick tree, and look, I think Flores is the exception because I do think Flores is a great coach and a great communicator, and I think that him getting fired was idiotic. Again, Brian Flores, like it came out this week, got in a fight with the general manager because he wanted Justin Herbert and the GM wanted Tua. I think history will tell us that Brian Flores was right on that one. And again, Brian Flores had a winning record with Tua as his quarterback in spite of the situation. But if you look at the situation right now, the Belichick tree struggles because they are incredibly hard on players, and the head coach basically it's his way or the highway. Now, I think that can work. I think that works better in college football when you have a lot of young kids. And I think Joe Judge that might work like a college school. So again, I think he could be a successful Division One coach. I think that kind of attitude works. But the problem is, if you don't have the pelts on the wall like Bill Belichick does to prove, like, hey, I know I'm a hard ass, but my way works because I got 6 Lombardi trophies in New England and multiple ones with the Giants and around the NFL. It's not going to work. And I think it worked last year because the Giants at least were in every game. They were close. They were playing well. But when this team started off poorly, I think they started to amount. And again, you look like the stories about Judge not getting along with Jason Garrett, and basically, they gave Judge the opportunity to fire Jason Garrett, and it was his decision. And at the time, I said, look, if this goes sideways, that's not good for Judge. And it didn't just go sideways; it went sideways, up, down, left, right, went every bad direction it could possibly go. And again, Joe Judge, like, he made that decision as the head coach. And again, like I kept saying, he did everything in his power to almost get fired because I do think the Mara family and Tish did not want to get rid of him and have, again, this negative legacy that they just run through head coaches, that they can't keep coaches, that they're just giving everyone 2 years. So I just look at this situation too. Like, I just feel like the Giants, like, again, I've seen Harbaugh connect to the Giants. I think Harbaugh needs the perfect situation. And again, I don't think this is it because in San Francisco, the biggest problem for him was the quarterback. Like, to me, I almost feel like if there's a team that makes sense, and I know this won't happen because they don't want to go the college route again. To me, Jacksonville almost feels perfect because it's the potential to have a great quarterback at Trevor Lawrence. It's low expectations. And again, I do think Harbaugh wants to have major say in the front office and how the roster is constructed. And I do think Jacksonville would let him do that. I don't know if the new GM for the Giants is going to be able to do that. So I just look at the head coaches out there. Like, Zimmer is a good offensive coach. Again, worked well with Cousins. Flores is a good coach. I know the Giant fans won't like this one because he was an Eagle, but Doug Peterson is out there. There's a lot of good offensive mind. Eric Bieniemy. I mean, there's a lot of good coaching candidates this year. I'll tell you this, it's a lot better year to try to find a head coach than it is to find a quarterback. So again, I think that's a good thing for the Giants. Just looking at some of the comments now, reports where Garrett was a forced marriage. Yeah, again, Judge asked Mara after last season to fire him. Mara asked to try it. Again, like, this is why I also feel bad for Judge because I think he was put in a losing situation with this organization because he had a horrible general manager. And again, this last off season, were him and Joe Judge on the same page? Because I think Joe Judge wanted to try to build this a little bit slower, but when Gettleman felt his job was threatened, he went nuts in free agency. And again, you looked at him being assigned to staff. It never works when, as a head coach, you're not allowed to pick the staff because, again, players see that. Players aren't dumb. Players know, like, they see it's an arranged marriage. And the other thing, too, is when you're Joe Judge and trying to create this atmosphere where it's your way or the highway, well, how's that play in the locker room when the front office is making decisions on your coaching staff? So, um, Peterson is a Shermer clone. They refuse to stick to the run when it's working. Again, like that's true. But again, Doug Peterson does also have a Super Bowl ring, and he did win with Nick Foles. So again, like I would take more of a shot on a guy from the Andy Reid tree than from the Belichick tree. So again, like I feel bad for Judge in the sense that he, to me, again, like I've said this before, he deserved to be fired from the way he conducted himself the last 8 weeks, but he also was put in a no-win situation with a bad front office, with a ownership group that was assigning him an offensive coordinator a year or two. And again, like I said too, like he didn't have the luxury to pick a quarterback. Again, it was an arranged quarterback marriage. And I wonder how much he really loved Daniel Jones. I don't know if we'll ever truly find out. But again, head coaches want to have, I think, a say in who the quarterback is. But I think it's one of the things we will never know. And again, Judge was, and like I've been seeing this more from Giant fans, like Giant Opinion Sports putting this out there, and and it's funny on social media. Like there's a lot of vitriol for Judge, but there's also a good portion of Giant fans that are saying like, look, he got screwed, and it really is unfortunate, and feel bad for Judge. And I do think there is a minority that wouldn't have mind keeping Judge, but again, to me, like this was a decision that just had to be made. Like I said, both routes were not good for the Giants, but this to me just was the easiest one of the two. And again, I just look at the situation. Judge was had a terrible roster, had a general manager that didn't have a plan, had a general manager that basically, you know, put them in a terrible position this is offseason on the way out. And again, like I said, I think the Giants were too nice. And one of the reasons the Giants look like still like a clown show, even when they made the decision that the majority of the fans wanted, they look like a clown show because, again, it took them a long time to make the decision. And I believe that the Giants didn't want to make decisions. Like I started this episode saying, my thought process is the ownership didn't want to fire him and wanted an excuse. And basically, they didn't want to have that reputation of firing a head coach after 2 seasons for the third time in a row. So, what was their out? Their out was easy. They hire a GM, and the GM says, I really want to bring in my own guy. So then the ownership group would say, well, hey, we love Joe. Joe was great for this organization, but in the best interest of football and for our best interest going forward, because our general manager thinks that he has a better fit for this organization, it just didn't align. It just doesn't work. And again, I just feel like that is the majority of the feeling is like the Giants fans got it right. I mean, sorry, the Giants organization made this decision right. But again, they take till Tuesday to make a decision on Judge, and they allow Dave Gettleman to retire. I think that's what irks a lot of Giant fans right now. Sorry, I got something in my eye. Is not the fact that Dave Gettleman is gone. I mean, we all knew he was gone. Basically, it was like week 6, you felt he was gone. But to me, Giant fans, I think, wanted accountability. They wanted next to his resume that he was fired, because when it's put on your resume that you were fired, you were a failure. And yet, he's still a failure. He still will go down as probably the worst general manager in the history of the Giants. But he got to basically walk away and seemingly walk away on his own terms. I mean, let's be honest. It was a situation where both parties knew he was gone. but it was I think the Giants thought it was the nice way and the right way to handle it. But I don't think that's how their fan base feels. And like you can tell me in the chat if you agree or disagree with this take, but to me, the fan base wanted that on his resume because they wanted him to be embarrassed like this fan base has been embarrassed the last couple of years from the product that he's put on the field. They want to be embarrassed because of the comments that Gettleman has made in the press conference, the acting like he's smarter than everyone. And again, I said this earlier in the show, and I said this years ago after the Saquon Barkley draft. And again, I will preface this by saying this because I know some people will take this the wrong way. I understand, like, I would have taken a Saquon Barkley too, and I'm not trying to take any away from Saquon Barkley. But if I was running the New York Giants and my general manager came out after the first round of the draft like he did and boasted that he didn't take any phone calls for the number 2 pick in the draft, I would have fired him then. And people are saying, well, that's too harsh. Like, you can't do that. This is why. A general manager's job is to do what is best for your organization. It's to listen and to find a better solution. If a team, because they didn't get the chance, but if a team came to the Giants and offered them 3 first-round picks or multiple picks for the number 2 pick to slide back a couple spots so they could take a quarterback and the Giants could have a bunch of picks to build around Eli Manning, that would have been the smart decision. But the mere fact that you didn't even entertain those options, to me, is a fireable offense. And it's also maddening, too, because the Giants want to pretend, and I'm glad that Giant Opinion brought this up, um, that he brought this up. And again, the Giants keep trying to sell us and tell us they're a classy organization. They do everything the right way. They handle everything with class and with dignity. Dave Gettleman gets to retire after putting this franchise in probably the worst position it's ever been. But Jerry Reese, and I know people will argue, and I get it, that he didn't help. He was just there when they won the first Super Bowl. But again, he helped build the roster that won a second Super Bowl. I know Ernie, of course, he had a lot of the fingerprints on that first one. But again, Jerry Reese helped this organization get to the promised land twice. You fired him without a second thought midseason. Again, Jerry Reese, was he a great general manager? No. Did he deserve to get fired? Yes. But again, you talk about being a classy organization. You didn't show him any favors. You didn't show him any love despite him winning you a Super Bowl. What was this with Dave Gettleman? And I get it. Dave Gettleman has had a hard life and he's had things to overcome in his life. But if you put that to the side and the way he has operated, in the way he has worked as a general manager, when this team was at the trade deadline again this year, they couldn't sell off some pieces to get some draft capital. They just sat there and did nothing. You look at what I don't get why this team felt like they had to protect Dave Gettleman. Why does he get to retire? I mean, we all knew this halfway through the season. He was gone. Why didn't you just fire him during the season? Send a message. Didn't do that. He got to enjoy the last game of the season. He got to be out on the field and take pictures with his family, despite putting this team in a situation where their backup quarterback, when you knew you had a quarterback that had health issues and that hadn't been through a full season, your best option was Mike Glennon. And then you had Jake Fromm starting from the Buffalo practice squad. Part of the reason that they were hurt too is because the offensive line you put in front of them couldn't protect them. Yet you get almost like the hero welcome. Like, hey, you get to walk off and you get to be with your family. You get to take pictures. I mean, this is, you get to enjoy this last day of this absolutely miserable season. And again, like Joe Judge, and I get it, he deserved to be fired, but he has to be waiting in the wind for 2 days and get blistered by the media. Dave Gettleman deserved that criticism. And again, like the Giants almost protected Dave Gettleman more than their own head coach, because instead of, oh, the Giants fired Dave Gettleman, which we all knew. It was, oh, he just retired. He just got to walk away. Um, but again, you look again, Jerry Reese, the Giants held on for him too long too. Why did he get fired and get embarrassed? And Dave Gettleman just gets to, walk off in the sunset. Hey, good job. So, but again, guys, thank you so much for joining us. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We will be having plenty of New York Giants mock drafts coming through. Again, I'm just waiting to do a Giants mock draft until they have made a decision on the coach and because of the general manager. Because again, when I do a mock draft, I'm a little bit different with my mock drafts. I do them based on the organization and not necessarily who I would pick. I think a lot of people that do the mock drafts, they just do who they think's the best player and the best fit for that team. And again, I do think you can be that works in some extent, but again, I think if you want the most accurate mock drafts and the best chance to be right, you have to look at who they bring in, what their history is, what their upbringing is, what their organization is, what their tendencies are, because again, they can tell us what they are, because at least like I have an idea of what kind of player they value, what kind of skill set they value with the coaching staff, like what's the scheme value. Again, all that I have to have before I do a mock draft. So again, guys, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you do not miss any of that content coming down your way. Again, Joe Judge is out. A part of me feels horrible because again, I think he got a raw deal in New York. But again, like I said, this was a move the Giants had to make, because Joe Judge talked himself out of a job and he put himself in a position where he could not recover. And again, the Giants, they had two forks. They had a fork in the road. They could go two directions. Their decision became a little bit easier with this firing because it makes it a little bit easier to get a general manager and a head coach. But once again, this team needs to hit a home run. They do not have a margin for error this offseason, and they need to be perfect. And again, it comes down to who's going to be under center for this team next year. There's a lot of big decisions that are going to have to be made, and this ownership group has to make the right decisions on who's calling the shots as the owner, as the general manager, and who's calling the shots of the head coach. And if you're a Giant fan today, I would say, do you feel confident that they're going to make the right decision? I mean, we will have to see and wait to find out. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it as always. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at the handle at Rich Sports Talk for more great content. I'll see you next time. And again, Giant fans, mock drafts are coming your way. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of that content coming your way.